Burchett is going to go live on the YouTube channel.
On the YouTube channel.
Need to get rid of that echo first.
We're good. Tyler, you'll just give me a nod when you get everybody on. Okay. Good afternoon. We're going to call our April 6, 2020 informal meeting to order. We're doing this by WebEx. This is our first time. So hopefully we don't have a hiccup or two, but if we do, we'll work through them. I'm going to ask Mr. Johnson to go and call the roll. Reminder to everyone that all microphones are on. Mr. Johnson.
Commissioner Gannon.
Present.
Commissioner Keene. Commissioner Keene. Commissioner Joe Smith.
Present.
Commissioner Ray.
Present.
Commissioner Leverett.
Present.
Commissioner Hodges.
Here.
Commissioner Butts.
Present.
Commissioner Tangi Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Chandler.
Present.
Commissioner Lewis.
Here.
Commissioner Creed.
Here.
Commissioner Pritchard.
Present.
Commissioner Woodruff.
Present.
Commissioner Beal.
Here.
Commissioner Harper.
Here.
Commissioner Bryant.
Here.
Commissioner Rasnick.
Here.
Commissioner Knight.
Here.
Commissioner Johnson.
Present.
Commissioner Albert.
Here.
Commissioner Ricconi. Here. And I'll try again, Commissioner Keene. You have 20 members, sir.
All right. Commissioners, now we're going to turn your microphones off and we have a presentation from Mr. Ed Moss with the Veterans Treatment Court. If y'all give us a second to get Ed on.
It's on. I'm just going to start muting.
Ed, you can go ahead.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and County Commissioners. How are you?
We're good.
Good. In keeping with our last commission meeting, I wanted to give the County Commissioner and the Mayor's office a briefing in reference to where we are with the Veterans Treatment Court. As it stands today, we have 58 participants present at the Veterans Treatment Court. As you all know, we had a graduation, a Phase 5 ceremony on 25 February, and we graduated 21 participants from the Veterans Treatment Court. Now, we're full steam ahead, even though we have some challenges with this COVID-19. We have utilized multiple platforms via Zoom, Skype, FaceTime to continue our case management as it relates to the Veterans Treatment Court. And we're still doing sessions on Tuesday via Skype and Zoom as well. So we're full steam ahead. The only hiccups that we may have that we're running into right now is doing drug screens for our participants. And we're going to work that thing out here this week or the first part of next week. I don't want to take too much of your time because I know this is our first time doing it. So pending your questions, I'll get off and move to the next person.
Thank you, Mr. Moss. Commissioners, if you have any questions of Mr. Moss, if you'd hit your hand raise button. Cal, do you see any questions?
No, sir.
All right, we don't see any questions. So at this time, we do not have any zoning cases this month. So there's no need for any zoning resolutions. And we'll go right into our first resolution is resolution 2411. Commissioners, we're going to ask without objection, we'll suspend the rules to hear this. If you object to that, please hit your hand raise button.
This is no objections.
We see no objections for suspending the rules. So resolution 2411 is a resolution to establish a consent agenda as part of the internal operating rules of the Montgomery County Board of Commissioners. Commissioners, I'm going to walk through these 8 steps under the whereases real quick. It should be available to you on your screen. This is something that has been to the Rules Committee. And actually, the Rules Committee approved it, and we were going to wait till our new voting system came in. But with the current situation that we're in with the COVID-19 pandemic, we felt it would probably expedite some of these WebEx meetings, not knowing how long we have to have those. We're going to have these type meetings. So as you can see on the screen in front of you, under the whereases, which is the meat of the resolution, when we prepare a formal agenda, we will predetermine whether an item belongs on the consent agenda based on this meeting. And we will probably, prior to this meeting, as you'll see on the agenda I sent to you, we have some resolutions that have asterisks beside them. Those are the ones that we're saying could go on the consent agenda. They don't have to. They can be pulled off, or there could be other items put on the consent agenda. But then, as you'll see in step 2, after an informal session, the chair prepares a numbered list of consent items as part of or as an attachment to the formal meeting agenda. And then item number 3, typical consent agenda items will be, and you can see the list, but it's approval of minutes, final approval, proposals, reports, nominating committee, routine matters are typically what will go on there. And the language in the resolution does say, and some resolutions. You'll see as Mr. Burchett scrolls up to item number 4. At the beginning of the meeting, when we get to our resolutions, I'll call for the consent agenda and we'll read the items or the titles to be read. And at that point in time, we'll ask any members of the commission if there are any items that you would like to have removed from the consent agenda and discussed individually. Item number 5 says that if any member requests an item be removed, it must be removed and voted on separately. There'll be no request by any member of the body to debate it, discuss it, or deny it. It'll basically just go right back into our agenda. And then item 6 talks about once it's been removed, the chair will decide whether to take up the matter immediately after the consent agenda or place it in the regular meeting agenda. Our intention is to place it in the regular meeting agenda. Item number 7, when there are no more items to be removed, the chair clerk reads out loud the number of remaining consent items. Then the chair states if there's no objections, these items will be voted on together. Then typically we'd go through a motion, a second, all of our typical voting rules, and it would be voted on by a single vote. And then number 8 is dealing really with the clerk. When she prepares the minutes, she'll include the full text of the resolutions, reports, or recommendations that were adopted as part of the consent agenda and those considered separately if removed. Do any of you have any questions? If you would, please hit your hand raise button. We see no questions. Make sure somebody didn't hit their hand raise button and we didn't see it. Commissioner Gannon.
Move to approve.
We don't have to vote on it, but thank you.
No, that's right.
Commissioner Leverett.
Commissioner Leverett. Commissioner Leverett.
Okay, there we go. All right. So when no, this is just agenda for any committee or just for the commission as a whole, but in any agenda that we're looking at. I'm still a little foggy on what consent agenda. Does that mean every agenda or just for the county commission?
Just for the county commission.
Okay, not committee meetings. Okay. All right, got it. I wasn't clear. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. No other hands raised? Okay, commissioners, we'll go to item number 24.1. As you can see, the email I sent today, this is an item that we're proposing to be put on the consent agenda. It's a resolution of the Montgomery County Board of Commissioners appropriating funds for design fees for 12 classroom addition to Barksdale Elementary School. Commissioners, if you recall, the school system came to us back a couple of months ago regarding purchasing the Manual Family Life Center. After some conversations with Mr. House, they thought it would be in the best interest for this to be moved and the additional classrooms be added to Barksdale Elementary School. We're going to turn off I don't think Mr. House is on it. Marcia is on it. Marcia, is there anything you'd like to add to this before we ask for questions?
No, there's pretty much summed it up correctly.
Thank you, ma'am. Commissioners, any questions on Resolution 24-1? We see no questions, so we'll go to Resolution 24-2. This is an item that is also proposed to be put on the consent agenda. It's a resolution regarding per diem compensation for County Board of Equalization members and alternates. Ms. Hester is on the call. Ms. Hester, we're going to turn your microphone on if you want to give a brief explanation of this, please. Ms. Hester? Still on the call? Ms. Hester?
Can you hear me?
We can now.
Okay. Sorry about that. The County Board of Equalization is a body of citizens that represent different areas of the community, and they sit every year on June 1 and days after and hear value appeals from property owners in Montgomery County. The chair makes $45 per meeting. The rest of the members, there are 5 members and 2 alternates, make $40 per meeting. Their meetings really rarely ever run less than 4 hours. They had more meetings than not last year that were 8-hour-long meetings. And I am asking the commission to allow them to make $75 per meeting. Just to give you an idea of how many times they meet. In a reappraisal year in 2019, they met 14 times. In 15, I referenced that year because it was the year after the last reappraisal, they met 8 times. The average since I've been in office is they meet about 6 times a year. So if there are any questions, I'm certainly happy to answer them.
Thank you, ma'am. We're going to leave your microphone on. Any questions of Ms. Hester? Commissioner Harper.
Just one quick question. What's the average pay across the mid-state region for Board of Equalization?
Sure. I mean, it's different for every county. It's not established in law what it has to be. So it's certainly open to the local body to decide what they want to pay. I was talking to my CTAS rep early last week, not really about this, more about COVID-19, but I mentioned this, and he said that the average around the Middle Tennessee counties is about $100 a day. This body earns $75 a meeting. I didn't feel like it was appropriate to exceed that, so that's how I landed on 75, and that's the answer I got from my CTAS rep as to what other counties are paying.
Okay, good enough.
Any other question? Any other hands raised?
Commissioner Gannon.
Commissioner Gannon?
Yes, sir. Thank you. I think that raising it up to what we make on a committee meeting is a fair thing, and I support it fully 100%. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other hands? We see no further questions. The microphones will go off again. Resolution 24-3. Again, this is an item that is proposed to be put on the consent agenda. It's a resolution amending the budget of Montgomery County Information Technology for the implementation of a new point of sale devices, update audio system for courtroom 403, and implement of a new reporting system. Mr. Bryant, we're going to turn your microphone on.
Just dropped off the call.
Huh?
He just dropped off.
He's off the call. No.
I'm here.
Mr. Bryant,
Yes, sir.
you want to give a brief explanation of this?
Yes, let's start with the other contracted services and the data processing equipment. That was a request that came from the trustee's office for PCI compliant point of sale devices so that all transactions can be secure across the county. That was I think 11 of those installed, and the other contracted services was the cabling to go along with that, because some of the places do not have drops for these new devices. The licensing is for sheriff's office part, so they can do mapping with their tracking software. And last item, the other equipment is for courtroom 403, to make it identical to the other four. The other three courtrooms are the other courtrooms on the fourth floor. We have done 3 of them already, and this is the last.
Commissioner Gannon?
Where's the money going to come from? I know it's only 19,000 or 18,995, but is it coming from reserves or where?
Jeff Taylor? Hang on, we're getting your microphone on.
It'll come out of fund balance.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Johnson, you see any more?
No, sir, I did not.
We see no more hands raised. So we'll go to our next item on the agenda is Resolution 24-4, a resolution to approve bylaw changes to the Clarksville Montgomery County Community Health Foundation. Commissioners, this is something that we are required to approve. If we agree with it, the bylaws of the foundation are increasing the number of terms a director may serve consecutively from 3 3-year terms to 5 3-year terms. That's a pretty big increase. Any questions? Please hit your hand raise button. Commissioner Beal?
Yes, thank you. Quick question. What is the purpose for extending out the terms of these directors?
I serve on that board. I was not at that meeting. I really do not know the purpose of it.
Well, my opinion on that is I think 15 years is way too long for one person to sit on it, on a committee. So I'm having a little bit of an issue with this.
Well, this board, this commission obviously has the right to approve or disapprove this. Any other questions?
Thank you.
I'm not sure if Commissioner Gannon has another question or if it's from the board.
Commissioner Gannon?
Yes, sir. I'd have to agree with Commissioner Beal. I think, and I understand COVID and all that stuff, COVID-19 and what's going on in this time, but I think 15 years is way too much. I'm kind of borderline thinking 9 years is way too much. And this time when we're cutting county commissioners down to just one term, and so on and so forth, I find it, I don't think we should increase that to 15 years. So I would agree with what Commissioner Beal said, and I'm not in favor of this.
Any other questions? Commissioner Leverett?
Yeah, I just wanted to also say that, I understand what the Community Health Foundation does, but this is way too long, and to inform my commissioners that this did not pass in the budget committee. And Commissioner, when you talk about county commissioners one term, we'll talk later. All right, that's all I got.
Ask the commissioners to pull their hands down once they pass.
Yeah, commissioners, if you would, once your question's been answered, if you would pull your hands down, that will help us. Thank you. Any other hands raised for 24-4?
Yes, Commissioner Gannon.
Commissioner Gannon?
Yes, just to clarify with Commissioner Leverett, was that county commissioners get, basically we've narrowed down to on our committees, with exception to a few, that it's kind of one term on each committee and not getting renewed for a second term or a third term. That's what I was referring to.
Yeah, I think she may have misunderstood you, thinking you were talking about the commission itself, and you were speaking of committees that commissioners serve on. Any other hands raised? If you would, please turn your hands off. Resolution 24-5, this is an item that will be considered to be placed on the consent agenda. Resolution to apply to the State of Tennessee Department of Finance and Administration Office of Criminal Justice Programs for the Mental Health Transport Grant. This is a grant. It's doesn't require any money. All the sheriff is doing is asking to be able to apply for this grant. Any questions? Please hit your hand raise button. Commissioner Gannon?
It was a mistake, sorry.
We see no other questions. Our next resolution is Resolution 24-6, resolution to approve additional funding to make certain immediate improvements to the public safety training complex. We're going to let Mr. Powell turn his microphone on, and we will let him give a brief explanation, and then we'll turn questions on as your hands are raised. Mr. Powell.
Good evening. This request is for the small segment of the South Entrance Road to connect to the existing project that we already have ongoing. We've run this through the Training Complex Committee, Budget Committee, and this is where we set on trying to figure out exactly what it's going to take to get the bare minimum in there to do the roadway down to the future burn tower. This 180 is the amount needed minus the amount that we have taken off of the existing roadway topping, some money back out of the existing project.
Thank you, Mr. Powell. Any questions?
I don't know. Commissioner Gannon's hand's still up.
Commissioner Gannon?
It shouldn't be. Sorry.
Thank you. Commissioner Pritchard.
Commissioner Pritchard?
Yes, I can't see anything, the resolution that you're talking about, so I don't understand exactly what he's asking.
Stand by 1 second. We'll get it on the screen for you.
Thank you.
There is the be it further resolved in the whereas. This money will come out of the fund balance. Some is being transferred. You can see where the accounts are that it's coming from. I will say this is a road that's going to get us to a point where if we build the burn tower, we'll have the road built down to it. We're never going to get it built any cheaper than this. We've eliminated some of the asphalt from it, where we could go in and put asphalt on it at a later date, but it'll maintain the integrity of the road. Today, if you don't have a four-wheel drive vehicle, you can't even travel down that road. Any questions? Commissioner Knight.
So this is a shooting range for the county?
Yes, sir. It's our public safety training complex out off of Dotsonville Road, where we're building the shooting range. There's room for a K-9 training area, a possible training building, and a burn tower for not only our volunteer fire department, but possibly for the city of Clarksville as well.
Okay, that's pretty good. Will county commissioners be able to use that as well?
No, sir. Be closed to the public.
All right.
Commissioner Harper.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just so the other commissioners know, we were unanimous on the Public Safety Complex Committee that we thought this was the best solution for us.
Thank you, Mr. Harper. I know there's been several different scenarios submitted to the Public Safety Committee regarding this. And without a doubt, you said it just right. It's the best scenario that we've come together with. I want to say thanks to Nick and his bunch for this. Any other questions? All right, Commissioners, we'll now go to Resolution 24-7 is a resolution to amend the budget of various funds for fiscal year 2020 in certain areas of revenues and expenditures. Mr. Taylor, would you like to give a brief overview of Resolution 24-7?
Yes, sir, I can. On the revenue side, on the second page, I don't know if y'all are able to see it or not. First item is just adding $83,700 to the litter grant. Below that, it's just a correction to the Homeland Security grant where it was entered twice through the budget. The other one is just a computer grant that the Election Commission got for $1,810. And the last two revenues were $18,900 for Parks and Rec, Rich Ellen Park, where it was damaged, I believe, from the October 26th storm, and then $16,049 to be used from a courtroom security reserve. Moving on to the expenditures. First one is just, we have a couple items, $5,000 and $20,100 for indirect costs for mayor's office, along with fire prevention and control. Once again, the 18-10 for the election commission to buy computers. In my office accounts and budgets, $9,000. We're just moving those funds so that we can replace our folder sealer that folds and seals our checks, W-2s, 1094s, and various other items. The county clerk's office, we've had to increase their postage by $15,000, as well as add $11,000. Ms. Jackson's wanting to add a weather-resistant kiosk for outside, and it's going to cost an additional $11,000. Pretty much after that, on county general side, it's either grant cleanup or insurance recovery monies. And then on the capital project side, we've moved some money for the public safety training complex. We've moved $62,668 from one line item to another, be used towards the safety complex road construction. And then under public health and welfare projects, we've moved various funds, mainly from EMS 31 and the logistics center, towards improvements projects for EMS 22 and Station 20. And at the lastly, moving some money for the Barksdale design of the park. Any questions?
Any questions, Commissioners? Commissioner Johnson?
Thank you. The $83,000 for the litter grant, is that additional money or is that just a movement of funds from one spot to another?
That's approving of additional funds.
Jeff, you didn't come through real clear then. Could you repeat your answer?
That's I'm sorry, that's additional funds. That's not moving new money. I mean, moving old money, no.
Okay, thank you.
Any other hands raised?
No, sir.
We have no other hands raised. Jeff, I do have a question. What is, so this is, what's the hit to the fund balance?
The hit to the fund balance on this one, hold on, I've got my pages will change now. Actually, it's an improvement because of that one grant where we actually entered it twice. So it's actually an improvement of about $16,000.
Okay, thank you. Any hands raised? All right, the next item will be considered to be put on the consent agenda. It's resolution 24-8. This is a resolution enacting the grant of powers and authority upon declaration of emergency. Commissioners, all this resolution is really reporting to you what we've done under these emergency orders in compliance with it. And we just felt like from a housekeeping standpoint, we should report these items to you and let you vote on them through a resolution. Any questions? We see no questions. Commissioner Gannon?
Yeah, I just point of clarity for Attorney Tim Harvey. This is just for what we've done already. This doesn't enact the Powers Act from this point forward, if you will. Correct?
If you're talking about the General Powers Act, it doesn't enact the General Powers Act. Mayor Durrett, I will say this, that there have been some orders that have been rendered since this was actually drafted. If necessary, I'll counsel with the chair, who's the sponsor of this, but we may need to add in his subsequent orders and just list those. But he did those under the emergency powers granted by statute. It's informational to let the commission have that, let the commission know it's there, and let the commission make comment on it and to vote in support of it. So we may actually, Mayor, move to amend it to add the subsequent orders, because his orders only last 7 days, and then we have to renew them or modify them. So this was done to meet the budget committee, and there have been some orders since that.
Right. Yeah, and my point was, and I mentioned this to Mayor Durrett before, I got no problem giving him the potential of the Powers Act and stuff like that, but I think it should, if we do that, and I know this is different, if we do that, I'd like to see it sunset upon his end of his mayorship term, but that's for later and stuff like that. But that's the only clarification that I had.
Thank you, Mr. Gannon. Any other questions? All right, commissioners. Item number resolution 24-9 is a resolution of the Montgomery County Board of Commissioners to authorize the use of space in the Veterans Plaza for use by the on-site medical facility of Montgomery County and for the daily operation thereof. If you recall, we are relocating our VSO office into a larger space. This will allow the on-site clinic to expand. Rules require that the use of any county office space be approved by the commission. Is there any questions? We see no questions. Resolution 2410 has been pulled. So there'll be no action on it this month. Under old business deferred from March and April, Resolution 22-4 is a resolution to amend the inmate medical budgets for the Montgomery County Jail and the Montgomery County Workhouse for fiscal year 2020. Mr. Harvey, I don't know if you or Sheriff Fuson want to give an update on this. Kyle, if you would turn on the sheriff's and chief deputy's microphones, and then we'll take questions.
Sheriff's.
So Sheriff, your microphone is on.
Yes, sir, I can hear you. And you can hear me, hopefully.
Yes, sir. And Chief Deputy Smith is on as well. Do you or Tim, do you want to give an update on this?
I think the sheriff has told the commission previously that he and his group have been meeting weekly with the contracting party to determine how the costs arise, what the basis of computing those are, how the contract's being executed, and I certainly now am a part of that process. The sheriff brought me in, and I'm happy to participate with him. That's ongoing. Sheriff, there's a point where I would emphasize that we have a contract in place, and that contract is something that we're going to need to fulfill. And the sheriff, I think, can clearly speak to the budget considerations. I think they have enough money to pay currently, but this resolution probably needs to be addressed by the commission sooner rather than later.
Right. Really, the only thing that I add, Mayor, if I may, this resolution right here is addressing overages, things that are going outside of our facility to other medical facilities for treatment. And this money was the amount that was determined based on billing from those other facilities. But we do have the money in our budget to continue to pay the contractual agreement that we have with our medical provider. And I just wanted to make sure that everybody was on the same page with what this money is for. Not for paying the contract or contracted services for our provider. It is for paying the overages that are going outside to other facilities. The concerns that we've had that we've addressed with our medical provider were that of some discounts that should have been applied. And of course, the money for some staff that was not with the contract the entire period. So it's my understanding that we did get a portion of that credit back, and I think it actually just come in, but we still don't believe that it's the amount that is due. And then the other, as far as the discount that we should have gotten for the first half of the contract period, we're still negotiating with that medical provider to figure out what happened with that. And that's really about all that I know to say, but I just want to make sure that everybody was clear about what this resolution was for and what we're doing to work on our end to make sure that Montgomery County's interests are fulfilled by our medical provider.
Questions? Commissioner Beal?
Thank you. How much have we been credited, like you mentioned, and how much are we expecting to get?
Well, the first credit was for the staffing shortage, and we got that the other day. It was the amount of $27,000. And that was the original contract called for having a nurse in our booking area, which we didn't have that for X amount of days into the contract. So we got that reimbursed. Of course, how they arrived at that figure and how we arrived at that figure are two different routes, but logically they should be closer to the figure that we got. So we're still going to have a conversation with them about that. And as far as the discounts on the other ones, we're still trying to figure out what that should have been. But we know that we got little or no discount from the hospitals that was agreed upon during the contract. So we're just trying to figure that piece out to see exactly what it is that we're running. But again, that is for the outside services that were provided to the inmates. So just to kind of bring clarity to that, the discount that I'm referring to is that we have, or the medical provider has, with the medical facilities that we're bringing these inmates. So we bring them there for services that they cannot render here, and then negotiate a discount with that medical provider outside. Well, apparently there wasn't a discount worked out, or a discount that wasn't sufficient. So we're trying to get that worked through to get credit for the discount that we should have gotten. So that's still a discussion that's going on with the medical provider, and hopefully we can come to that solution real soon. But I couldn't tell you how much that would be.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Gannon. Commissioner Gannon?
Thank you, Mayor. This is an ongoing problem with the medical part and the dental part. This isn't the first time that we've had it and stuff like that. I know we got to pay our bills and stuff like that, but this is a lot of money and stuff like that. And I know that you've put a lot of time in, Mayor, on all this stuff. I would like to see possibly somewhere down the line us putting a task force together to help work this and to make sure that our eyes are on this and we don't get our eyes off the ball, because every time we take our eyes off this thing, it comes back to bite us every single time. So I would like to see us put a task force together. I know we got to pay our bills and we got to do what we got to do, but that's all I had. Thank you.
Well, to answer part of your question, I think there's been a line of communication that's been opened up that maybe was not there, not only with WellPath, but also with the sheriff's office, with risk management, and with the county attorney. And there's been a lot of work that's going on behind the scenes regarding this matter. And I can assure you, we're working diligently on it behind the scenes.
I agree.
And one more thing, if I might add, this is a new provider from our last year, which that's not an excuse, but I know that we do have more inmates in here that require more immediate medical needs that are coming through. But at the same time, there's some of those folks that may be going out that may not necessarily need to go out. But of course, that's something that we have to work out with this medical provider or the next.
Commissioner Pritchard?
Yes. It's my understanding this money here is just to pay the bills. And you are at this point in time giving WellPath intense scrutiny so that this doesn't occur again?
Yes, ma'am. This money here that you're seeing is a forecast amount for where we would be during this budget year. That's over what we've already appropriated in our budget for overages of our contract. But the issue that we have with the provider is one, the discount that was not applied at a facility that we were supposed to have one applied, and we're trying to rectify that. But also, this being a new provider, it seems that more inmates are going out of the facility. I think part of that is, as they say, that we have a more sick inmate population. But I think a part of that is more people are going outside of our facility that might not necessarily need immediate medical care. We want to make sure that we're providing the care that we have to provide to the inmates. But my concern or my thought is that maybe more of that's going out than what should. So that's something we got to get a handle on. I know that it is a medical expertise that we rely on, no matter who the vendor is. We're not medical doctors over here on our side. We just want to make sure that the county is not having to pay for something that we shouldn't have to pay for. So that is what we're working through, and we're learning a whole lot. And I know the mayor can say the same. Kyle Ruff has been a big help to us. Learning the ins and outs of this. I've learned more about medical care providing than I care to know. I can tell you that much, but I know that it is a big piece of the financial burden that is on the county. And it's not just our county, it's every county. But we have worked very closely with all of those parties involved to include our county attorney. And I think we're all on the same page with what needs to be done.
Okay, so a large portion of what will happen in the future may be in-house medical care, which will reduce this overage in the future, and only extreme medical services or services that cannot be provided in-house will be sent out. Is that something that you guys are actually concentrating on? Because I know I worked in the jail. I do know that with this medical care in jail, that a lot of times people are afraid they may be sued if they give medical care in-house and it's not sufficient. And that might be a problem that this company is looking at and sending them out just so that they can cover the bases, so to speak. But that may be something in the future that everybody can look at. And as far as Commissioner Gannon, I think a task force is a good idea. Thank you, Sheriff.
Yes, ma'am. And I feel the same way. I know that, some companies operate a little differently than others. I think that's part of the case here. We've got a new company that may rather send folks out than not, just to kind of cover their liability. And then at the same time, we've got to have things in place to kind of screen that ourselves, because we're the ones batting for Montgomery County. Our vendors may not necessarily be batting for us. They're a for-profit company. But I can certainly understand the liability issue and concerns with that. I'm not in the medical field. Don't want to pretend to understand that, but I think that's part of the issue there.
Thanks, Sheriff.
Commissioner Harper?
Question: how often does the jail and juvenile committee meet?
I believe it's once a quarter.
Quarterly?
In your opinion, Sheriff, would it make sense to split off this, and make a jail medical committee where they met monthly so that we can get some eyes on this?
Well, we've been opening more and more of this because it has been a topic for the last several years as we've seen this medical contract grow. So we have purposely been putting that more of that information in front of the jail and juvenile committee. So however the committee needs to be made up to discuss these issues, we can present it either way. If it's the commissioners that are on that are privy to that information and kind of set up a little different where they can kind of guide some of the decisions made on the medical contract. That's certainly, you know, up to whatever the commission chooses to do.
I tend to agree with Commissioner Gannon on this, that we need to have a more consistent, more in-depth look at it. I know at times, you know, when I was on the audit committee, we had to meet monthly, and that was a quarterly meet just because we've got issues. So I would encourage maybe the rules committee to look at it.
Okay. Anybody else, Kyle?
Commissioner Knight.
Commissioner Knight?
I just wanted to say that I agree with Commissioner Gannon and Commissioner Harper to the extent that I know being on the jail and juvenile committee myself, I know we meet quarterly, and I would think that with situations like this and with issues like this, we should be meeting monthly in order to take a good look at everything operationally, what's going on, because we owe it to our our constituents and to the community to be, you know, fiscally responsible when it comes to, you know, money and where it goes. And I think this is a big issue that we need to have our committee probably meet about monthly.
Can I suggest this with the series of questions that have been made and looking at this resolution? The duties of the constitutional officer of the sheriff are to run the jail, and then he presents to the commission the way he runs the jail, seeking budget approval and monies to run it. And I think without a doubt that there has been maybe not a task force of commissioners or the jail committee, but there have been some intense hours spent by the sheriff's department working directly with this vendor on questions about efficiently handling this. I mean, many hours. And they all preceded a call to me, but I'm now engaged in it too. So there's that component, which is looking at what we have done and being efficient through the constitutional officer who runs the jail, and maybe how we would do things differently. And then there's that second component that's maybe recognizing we have to pay this bill, which is this resolution, the third-party providers. So I think if you do work through the sheriff and he sets up those committees as he wants to, but I for one, just wanted to separate those two and tell you that the sheriff and his staff, not just the sheriff, many of his staff people have been meeting weekly or every 10 days with this group to hone in on these costs and discounts and make sure we're doing the right thing.
I'm certainly not opposed to the sheriff, if he'd like to do this, to get the chairman of the jail and juvenile committee to call monthly meetings to give that committee an update on it. But and I think the sheriff will be more than happy to do that.
I think more people that have information, the more that they'll understand what this is. And, you know, it's got nothing to do with things being managed improperly. Maybe some things that weren't handled by the vendor, you know, the way that we would assume for that to be. Because these things are always a big point of discussion. And there's a lot of discussion that we have both during the RFP period, during the season when we see these numbers start to go up, and then after the fact when, you know, we know we've got to come back and get more dollars to help fund them. So, you know, trying to line all of that up with some expert in the medical field that can look at this and help guide us, I think is where the answer needs to be. I think sharing the information with the commissioners is great, but I think we need to have somebody there that clearly understands that, you know, in the medical field, that, you know, will be a part of that discussion to help guide some of those decisions.
See any more questions? Commissioners, we don't see any more hands. Commissioner Gannon?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I agree with what the sheriff said. If we do a task force, then yes, you probably need to have some medical doctors on there that know a little bit more about the medical scenario as well, in addition to others. Thank you.
Commissioner Leverett?
Everyone, as the chair of the jail and juvenile committee, I am, you know, all in on work with the sheriff, meeting more often until we can get this matter feasible and you know, best for the county. You know, I think at the end of the day, it's really, you know, in the words of Cool Hand Luke, we just have a failure to communicate. And so we can get that together, communicate with the company, work with the sheriff office, but I'm okay with meeting more frequently, monitoring this closely, working with the rules committee, audit committee, budget committee, whatever we have to do to make sure that we are being better stewards of the county money. Then I'm all for it. And if the sheriff wants to talk, he and I offline, and Mr. Harvey, I'm okay with this. But right now, I think this is something we need to make a decision on at least next week. We need to make a decision on this resolution and get it behind us, and then go forward, making sure we have some better boundaries and parameters in place when it comes to medical care for our inmates. That's all I have.
Thank you. We don't see any more hands raised. So next on our agenda, commissioners, you'll see the reports that will be up for approval. Without objection, we will put the commission minutes, the county clerk's report, the notary list, and the nominating committee nominations on our consent agenda. Under further reports, you'll see, as required by the state, our report on the debt obligation, the $14,673,678.71 for the school system laptops. Commissioners, anybody have any questions on that debt report? Commissioner Knight?
I think we can't see it on screen again.
We're getting close.
We're getting close to finding it. It's pretty deep in the agenda.
Gotcha.
Yeah. All it is a form that the state sends us every year when we do something like this, that we're required to report to the state on the debt obligation. There it is. That's it on the screen. If you blow that up just a little bit, please. Maybe scroll down just a little bit, Skip.
We're sent the drop.
Right. Okay. Any other questions on the debt obligation report? No questions? Under our announcements, commissioners, at the formal session, the chair will look for a motion to suspend the rules to add a resolution to amend the procedures for any public hearing that is required to comply with the governor's emergency orders. The mayor will send out this proposed resolution to suspend the rules by email to all of you no later than 10 a.m. Wednesday, April the 8th, and it'll allow for public participation within the applicable law and the current emergency conditions. Commissioner Gannon?
Just to back up for a second on the debt obligation there for the 14 million on the computers, do we do that through bonds or do we do that through notes, or how does that get paid? Because I noticed we pay interest on that of 1.9 something.
Jeff Taylor?
It was a lease agreement that the school system signed with the computer company, so it's just purely a lease agreement. There was no bonded debt or anything with it.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Any questions about the other suspension of rules regarding procedures for public hearings? Again, we will have that to you no later than Wednesday at 10 a.m. No questions. So, commissioners, just to run back through the agenda real quick, I'm going to go over the items that we're going to place on the consent agenda. It would be resolution 24-1, 24-2, 24-3, 24-5, 24-8, and 24-9.
We may amend 8.
8 may be amended to add the emergency orders to that, but without objection, if somebody wants to pull it, they can pull it. And then the reports for approval on our minutes, the clerk's report, and the nominating committee nominations. And again, if the rule, if 2411 passes, we will have a consent agenda after that, and those items will be on that agenda. Any questions? Commissioner Harper?
Yes, Mayor. I think there were a couple misspellings in, I think, the original, how we're going to do order things. I think there was one in the Board of Equalization. You might want to like check on those a little bit. Just spelling errors in those resolutions.
Okay, we'll do that. Thank you, sir.
Sure.
Any other questions? Commissioners, we have no further. What? Commissioner Gannon?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor. I just have one quick one. Well, first, I want to commend Commissioner Harper for wearing that hat that he's got on. He looks very dapper. He kind of almost looked like Commissioner Woodruff a little bit there. But my question comes back to the nominating committee report. When it goes on to the consent agenda, I understand that part, but will we not read anymore for the mayor's or the nominating committee's nominations during this informal meeting, or is it just going to be a line item and we just go straight to the consent agenda for the formal meeting?
But they will be read at the informal meeting, just like every resolution is discussed during the informal meeting.
Okay.
But they will be placed without objection. They'll be placed to vote on as part of the consent agenda.
Gotcha. Because I did not read the nominating committee's report today. If this is the informal meeting.
Did it go through Dropbox?
Yeah, they just had it at 5:30. Well, without objection, would you please read the nominating committee report?
Sure. I don't know the procedure.
That's a good point. Good point.
The nominating committee met today. We only had one board that we were meeting on. We met at 5:30 electronically. We were on the County Board of Equalizations, which is a 2-year term. The nominating committee made the following recommendations: that Robert M. Fort is eligible to serve another 2-year term to expire April of 2022. Chris Barnett is eligible to serve another 2-year term to expire April of 2022. And Lisa Boyd is nominated to replace Gary Ellis to serve her first 2-year term to expire April of 2022. And we will enter that as a motion next week on the consent agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gannon. I appreciate you catching that. Any other questions before we adjourn? We have no other questions, Commissioners. I want to thank each and every one of you. I thought this went as smooth as possible. I want to give a big shout out to Skip Burchett with our IT department, with Michael Swift, Jared, Kurt, everybody that helped pull this off, and Kyle Johnson as well. So I hope you have a great evening. We stand adjourned.
Thank you.